welcome here. I'm glad you can make it. My name is Jason Klassen, and I'm the lead pastor of the Open Door Church. I hope you felt really welcome, and I'm glad you guys can join us this morning. I want to talk to you this morning about my favorite physics formula. You guys all have a favorite physics formula, don't you? Yeah? What's your favorite? Come on, what's some of your favorite physics formulas? Deafening silence. I picked a great time to talk about some of my favorite physics formula because today, actually, two of my teachers from when I was like 7, 8, 9 years old are here. Miss Brandt and Miss Kelleran are both sitting here in terms of my grade 1 and grade 3 teacher. I actually didn't know that when I was planning this, so I'm going to talk about some more advanced physics. I don't believe either one of you two taught me physics in grade 1 or 3. I don't remember clearly. Most of that was just a blur of hyperactivity for me, but still. God bless you for having the patience to even see me now later on in life after what I put you through. Just such a heart. My favorite physics formula is actually the one right up there. I call it fat equals MAV. And this morning, I'm going to teach us all how to leverage fat. All right? All of you need to leverage fat. Fat is one of the most important concepts in not just our lives, but our spiritual lives and our discipleship. And it's a topic that the Bible deals with primarily indirectly, but it's rife. It's one of the major concepts in the Bible, actually, is fat equals MAV and leveraging fat. So that's what I want to talk about this morning. And you're all totally with me and totally like tracking, aren't you? We want to get fat this morning. Woo! Absolutely. That's actually not called fat equals MAV. It just kind of looks like it. And that was my little mnemonic device to help remember this when I was in maybe grade 10, I think is when you learn this in physics. I'm not sure, grade 11. Whatever it was, my little mnemonic device was fat equals MAV, let's get fat. And so when I first learned this, when my physics teacher, when Nick Melnick first taught me this, it was like an amazing light bulb went on in my head. And I immediately, even then when I was a younger kid, I understood how important this was in life. As I learned about this and understood it. I had believed in the power of this my whole life, but I didn't have the words to talk about it. And sometimes when you understand a concept in abstract in your head, but you don't have the language to talk about it, you miss all the details and you miss how to leverage it. And so when I saw this was huge in my life, and I've carried this in my heart for a very long time. And so I'm excited to be able to share it with you. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Well, like I said, this isn't called fat equals MAV. This formula is called impulse equals momentum. Impulse. So a force over time equals the mass times the velocity. That little triangle, that's actually not an A. It's the Greek symbol delta, and it just means change. So a force times a time equals the mass times the velocity. So the mass of things, the weight of things, doesn't typically change. It stays constant. So that means is if you apply a force over some short time, an impulse is a force over time, that will determine the velocity, which is both the speed and direction of the object. So it's all clear now? You totally understand how that'll change your life, right? Totally makes sense. All right, so what this is if you've ever watched baseball, have any of you ever seen baseball? Raise your hand if you've seen baseball. All right, so if you're the batter, what's the most important millisecond of your time in the batter's box? The moment your bat touches the ball, right? The moment your bat touches the ball. Everything hinges on that one moment when your bat touches the ball, right? You practice and you train for months and years. You practice focus, hand-eye coordination, form, stance, delivery, follow-through. You practice everything all for that 1 millisecond when your bat touches the ball. You can't control the pitcher. You can't control how the pitcher pitches it at you. You can't control what kind of pitch you receive. You can't control what any of the people out on base are. You can't control how many strikes or balls you have. You can't control anything but the moment your bat touches your ball. And it's a millisecond, right? But this says the amount of force you apply to that ball and for how long determines, of course, the mass, the weight of the ball doesn't change, so it determines the velocity, which is speed and direction. It determines how far and how fast and in what direction that ball goes. And all you can control on the left side of that equation is your force and your time. That's it. You've got these variables to control those variables. You have one moment to influence the momentum forever. In fact, I got a little object lesson here. All right, how many of you are good at catching? See, I can put force into this stick, right? I can put force into, this is Hannah's hockey stick, so I'm kind of doubled over here. I can put a force into this stick, and I can make the blade of this stick travel as hard as I want, as hard as I'm able, I guess. But this stick is only going to touch this ball for a microsecond. And yet this ball is going to travel for a ways. In fact, how I hit this ball, where I hit it, how I'm aiming, the angle, where my feet are, how I hold my, all of these factors all come down to where the ball goes, right? It's just a second. It's all it is. And yet where and how I apply my force for just a millisecond determines the direction of this ball. You didn't catch, Joan. You could have caught that one. Determines the direction of this ball for the rest of its travel time until it's done, right? So I can direct it anywhere I want to, except these balls don't travel that far. I have a millisecond. I have a moment to influence the momentum for the rest of that ball's travel time. I can control the moment. I reap the result of the momentum. The sad reality, sad, happy, I don't know, it's just the truth. The reality is the vast majority of our life is spent on autopilot. Your life is spent mostly on autopilot. And that's okay. That's actually not a problem. It's just something you have to realize that the vast majority of your minutes alive are traveled on and lived out through momentum. They are lived. They're just simply lived. They're not chosen. They're not thought about. They're not pondered over. They're not like philosophically deep. They're just moments in your life that you live. And that's okay. In fact, science tells us through statistical averages, you will spend 64.5 minutes of your day eating. That is putting food in your mouth and chewing. A little over an hour. Now, you might spend a moment choosing what you want to order at a restaurant, but you will spend 64.5 minutes of your day eating, chewing, and swallowing on your choice. Furthermore, you will spend 512 minutes of your life in bed. Notice I didn't say sleeping. As a certified insomniac, I can tell you the vast majority of my minutes have not been spent sleeping. But at least I was lying there tossing and turning. You will spend 512 minutes in bed, like it or not. That's about your average per day. That's a lot of your time. You don't think about it that much, right? You just are sleeping because you were tired. Man, that's the way it goes. Facebook. But 136 minutes that you will spend each day on social media. Just think about that. 136 minutes. I said you'd spend 64.5, just over an hour, eating. Now, I think some of us understand that we are what we eat, right? We're careful what we put into our mouth. We're careful what we eat. We're careful how we diet, maybe how many calories versus how much fat and so on. But listen to this. If you believe in the importance of whether you follow a diet or not, if you believe in the importance of dieting, just as a little sidebar for you, this is a freebie. You can just have this one for free. You spend about an hour of your life eating. You spend about 2 hours on social media. Are you twice as careful with your social media as you are with your meals? Because you're feeding your brain every time you're on social media, just like you're feeding your body every time you eat. So we should be, statistically speaking, twice as careful with our time on social media as we are with our food. That's not what we're talking about, but I think it's worthwhile. You say, I am over such and such an age and I don't spend time on social media. That's okay. Because I got stats about TV. You will spend 2 hours and 11 minutes of your time watching TV, YouTube, or Netflix. 2 hours and 11 minutes is a long time to just kind of coast. You are not actively engaged. In fact, your brain is less active while watching TV than it is while sleeping. Wow, think of that. 42 minutes of your day will be spent on average buying things and thinking about things you want to buy. 42 minutes. And my favorite one, 101 Dalmatians. No, 101 minutes spent driving. Just driving. Maybe you listen to a podcast or something like that in your driving time. But for the vast majority of your time, you're just driving or sleeping or eating or all of those things that we call life. You're living momentum. You're living your mass times velocity. You got a certain mass in your life, you got a certain speed and direction in your life, and you're just living in the momentum side. But we all get this. Some of our days, some of our year, some of each hour of each day are choices. They're moments of interaction with something deeper than the momentum of your life. And the reality is, this formula says, God says, and I think we can all bear witness, that your moments, your few moments, equal your momentum. And in fact, your moments determine your momentum of your life. And so what we need to realize is it's actually okay to spend a lot of your life on sort of an autopilot. If you had to, every time you want to fill in gas, you had to spend the same amount of time thinking about which gas station you were going to use and what price would be a good price. And if the price is so and so high, do I fill in less gas or more gas? And then which Bowser, which pump at the gas station do I choose? And do I do self-serve or do I do full serve? And do I pay with credit, cash, or debit? If these were big choices, this would just shut your life down. So it's okay to just pull into the nearest gas station and fill in gas. That's all right. You just need to learn to recognize, and we need to learn to leverage and how to handle our moments so that our momentum takes us where we actually want to go. And so I want to preach this message and talk about this message as we get back into the swing of things, because you're about to enter fall, winter, that whole season. School starts. A lot of people go back to school. Maybe your kids go back to school. Maybe you're going back to school. The church calendar gets rolling. A lot of momentum is about to build in your life. Hockey's about to start. Hockey has started already. That's just depressing to me. But whatever the case, hockey's about to start. Has started. Your momentum in your life, one person's happy about it, the rest of you aren't. Your life is about to gather so much momentum, and that's okay. That's okay. But you'll have a few moments to make a choice what kind of momentum you want your life to enter. We have to live in the fat. Leverage the fat and reap the benefits of the mav. The impulse and the moments determine your momentum. It's as simple as that. And in fact, actually, this is something that we learn a lot about. In fact, I was in a double vehicle accident, maybe 15 years ago or so. I wasn't driving. I was a passenger. And here's what happened. Here's a good instance of fat equals mav. I was a passenger. The driver had stopped. Or the driver ahead of us had stopped their car. It was an Audi, a nice Audi TT, had stopped at a stop sign in front of us. The driver I was with, she wasn't the greatest driver. It wasn't Destiny, don't worry, I'm not tattling on her. This was not a very great driver. She was busy talking. Till I said, car stopped. And she's driving along and hits the brakes. Sheer ice. Sheer ice. Now, we're in Winnipeg on a city street going maybe like 50 kilometers, 45 kilometers an hour. So it wasn't maybe a fast accident. We're in a truck, right? We're hitting the back end of a car, so it seems like a safe accident. Here's the problem. There was a pedestrian walking across the street. The car had stopped for a pedestrian at a crosswalk. We come along. The pedestrian walks in front of the car. The truck hits the back end of that Audi. This is sheer ice, keep in mind, right? Have any of you ever seen curling? Right? You know when you hit the rock, what happens? The rock that does the hitting stops, and the rock that gets hit moves, right? So we stopped like a rock right there in the middle of the highway. And the Audi took off at about 45 kilometers an hour. And this person's just walking, and all of a sudden an Audi goes flying by them. Everyone's fine. Just brushes her shirt as that Audi rockets through the intersection suddenly. What happened? A millisecond of contact. The truck was not in contact with that car for more than a couple of milliseconds. What happened? That car traveled right through the intersection. It was a four-lane, it was actually Main and Broadway, right where Main and Broadway meet. Right across that four-lane intersection, right past the stoplights on the other side, and probably had 2 or 3 car lengths down Main Street past Broadway. 1 millisecond. One moment of indecision, one lack of understanding of the importance of this moment, and if that had been 3 seconds earlier, somebody would have died. That's how serious that was. But luckily, God was involved. That person had walked through and we were saved. But if we don't understand and leverage the power of these moments, we live out the consequences of our momentum. In fact, I want you to turn with me to Genesis. I could have basically put my finger in the Bible anywhere and picked something to illustrate this point, because this is something the Bible talks about all the time. But I like this story, and I'll get into why a little bit. I want you to turn to Genesis. So if you open your Bible, you're right there, because it's at the beginning. Genesis is the first book. If you fire up your app and you haven't opened your app for a few months, it'll probably default into Genesis, so you can do that too. Genesis 13. It's a wonderful story. There's a guy named Abram. If you ever heard us talk about Abraham, it's actually the same guy. God changes his name as a symbol of God's favor with Abram. But this is when he's still Abram. And Abram's been growing his flocks and his influence in the land for a while. But his brother, Lot, is with him as well. And his brother Lot's also been growing. Sort of piggybacking off of, I'm going to keep calling him Abraham because I just think Abram is just, I don't know, it's a name I don't get used to. But so Abraham and Lot are side by side, and they're both growing in influence. But as they've grown, tensions have begun to mount. You see, there's land is spoken for all around them. And they're living in this valley with both of their flocks. And their flocks have grown so big that all of their various shepherds and hired hands are starting to fight, right? This is my grazing pasture, this is my well, that sort of thing. I know you guys would never engage in such petty disputes with your neighbors, but back in Bible times, sometimes people did that. I said knowingly. So this is a case where the conflict was growing and rising, and I want to look at how Abraham handles this, how Lot handles this, and see the impact of fat equals Mav. So starting in verse 1, we're going to read to verse 18. You can read along with me. It says, Then Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev, he and his wife and all he had, and Lot with him. So they're together now. And Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and gold. And he went by stages from the Negev to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had formerly been. So this is just a little backstory to the whole thing. To the site where he had built the altar. And Abram called on the name of Yahweh there. He called on the name of God. Now Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks, herds, and tents. But the land was unable to support them as long as they stayed together. There just wasn't enough to go around for their growth. For they had so many possessions that they could not stay together. And there was quarreling between the herdsmen of Abraham's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock, as you would. And at that time the Canaanites and the Perizzites were living in the land. They had no place to expand. They had to make some choices. Then Abraham said to Lot, Please, let's not have quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, since we are relatives. Let's solve this civilly. Isn't the whole land before you? Separate from me. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Abram's the bigger farmer here. Keep this in mind. He's the bigger herdsman. He's the older brother. He's the one with more of everything. But he's being very generous here. He says, look, Lot, I'll give you first choice, right of first refusal. You pick what you want. I'll take the rest. So Lot looked out and saw that the entire Jordan Valley, as far as Zoar, was well watered everywhere, like the Lord's garden and the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what you call, in literary terms, foreshadowing. This was before God had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Just file that away for later. So Lot chose the entire Jordan Valley for himself. Then Lot journeyed eastward, and they separated from each other. And Abraham lived in the land of Canaan. But Lot lived in the cities of the valley and set up his tent near, everybody say it with me, Sodom. Foreshadowing said this was before God had destroyed Sodom. This is a bad idea. Now the men of Sodom were evil, sinning greatly against the Lord. So Lot chose the value of the land over the character of the people. After Lot had separated from him, the Lord said to Abraham, Look from the place where you are. Look north and south and east and west. Which, by the way, east is where Lot had gone. So that's interesting. For I will give you and your offspring forever all the land that you see. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust on the earth, then your offspring could be counted. Get up and walk around the land through its length and its width, for I will give it to you. And so Abram moved his tent and went to live near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. After this moment, I encourage you to read the next, 15, 20 chapters of Genesis. You can do it in about an hour or two. It's not that long a read. Just the next couple of chapters. Do you know what you will find? Lot's life sucks. Lot's life goes from disaster to disaster to disaster. Lot moves in with Sodom. God says he wants to destroy Sodom. He tries to rescue Lot and his family. But all of his daughters have married evil men in Sodom and gotten involved in the politics and the culture. And Lot has to leave with his wife and his daughters and leave everything behind. And as God destroys Sodom, even his wife looks back against God's warning. And his wife turns to salt, and he loses his wife, and he loses his flocks, and he loses his wealth. And his daughters lose their husband. And Sodom and Gomorrah is wiped out, and Lot has nothing. And his life is one disaster after disaster after disaster. And Lot's lineage are some of the tribes that later on, when the Israelites come out of Egypt, they have to dispossess and conquer tribes that come directly from Lot, and Lot has nothing. Even his family name is wiped out of the Bible. And Abraham, after this, goes from blessing to blessing to blessing. And even when Abraham screws up, and he does, he's a real person, even when he screws up, somehow God flips it on him, and he gets blessed. Abraham can't do wrong, it looks like, and Lot can't do right. They both live in the momentum of this moment for the entirety of their life, and their children and their children's children and their children's children's children, down to current present day, live in the curse or the blessing of this moment. We have to learn as a people to understand, recognize, and leverage our moments. Do you stay at your job? Or do you go apply at the new one? Do you live in this town or do you live in that town? Who do you marry? Who do you choose to date? See, here's the thing. People often talk about really wanting to make the right choice about who they choose to marry, and then they're really slack with who they choose to date. You notice that? As a pastor, I've noticed that. And so people think a lot about the kind of person they want to marry, and then they get really sloppy with their choices of who they want to date. But who you date tends to be the kind of person you end up marrying. You need to recognize the moments because you live in the momentum. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not always the big moments that you necessarily recognize that determine your momentum. I know I remind myself daily. I really try to remind myself, because I decided before Hannah was born, I'm going to pick on Hannah, she's right here right now. I decided before she was born that if she would ask me a question, I wouldn't always answer it, because some questions you just can't answer. They get very abstract. But I would at least listen to her well and properly. And I don't always do this. I'm not claiming this is something I always do, but I would fully try to listen to her question. I decided that those moments, because I remember getting answers that led me down wrong paths and right paths, answers that made me curious or answers that made me feel embarrassed for having asked questions. And I remembered throughout my life different moments where answered questions or unanswered questions knocked me on different paths of good and bad. And I decided, and there's probably things I'm missing like crazy, don't get me wrong, but I decided with my daughter I would try to handle question moments well. I would take those moments, because who knows how the momentum carries on. Do you understand what I'm saying? So what can we learn about fat equals mav? What can we learn about moments determine momentum from the story of Abraham and Lot? I'm going to wrap this up for you guys this morning. I think three things. We're going to go through them sequentially. There's three instances, three moments in each moment. And you can see this with hockey. Now, I'm not that good at hockey. I should probably call one of the Clace kids up here, but I won't, because they're all chippy and lippy. I keep having to kick them out of the church. There are three moments. There's how you, this is a little ball, I know. There's how you approach the puck. There's how you set up your swing, right? How you plant your feet. I mean, I'm going to say Ethan is a much better slap shot than I am. Ridiculously much better slap shot than I am. In fact, almost all of you are a better slap shot than I am. But I bet you I can beat you with my slap shot if you have to stand on one skate. Right? If you're standing on one skate, I don't know, maybe some of you can still beat me. I'm actually pretty bad. But if you're standing on one skate and you're not well planted, you don't get to control your force, because you have to remember this stick interacts with that ball or that puck for a millisecond. And little tiny changes in the angle of attack, little tiny changes in the force, little tiny differences are going to make a huge difference 20, 30, 40 feet away as this travels through the air. You understand what I'm saying? And so when you're playing hockey, or baseball, or whatever, You all know that how you start, how you plan, how you approach is going to change the level of interaction in the moment. And we get this. And so if you're into golf, you're going to be practicing on your swing. And are you dropping your shoulders? And I don't know, all these things, rotating your hips on the follow through. I don't know. I hate golf. But you're going to understand that you need to start focusing on these moments because you only have a millisecond of interaction and you live with the momentum of that moment for the rest of that shot. Clear? Here we see what Abraham did. It's a little throwaway verse. It's a little throwaway verse right in the beginning. Verse 4. See, Abraham's moving together and they got big flocks and he sees trouble brewing. The herdsmen are fighting. He's going to have to sit down with Lot, and he's going to have a potentially difficult talk, right? This isn't working. I know we're family. We're going to have to split. That's a big deal. Wars have been started for less than this. So how does Abraham go in? How does he start well planted? Well, verse 4. To the site where he had built the altar, and Abraham called on the name of Yahweh. Abraham started his day walking with God. He started well planted. He entered into the moment with a relationship deeply founded and focused and rooted in God. Some of you are trying to make your decisions and handle your moments, and you're really, really, really trying to do very well. But listen, I don't care how much you want to and how much you try to focus on the moment of the test. If you didn't study and if you didn't attend class, you're not doing well on the test, right? This is all very clear. We get this. I don't care how badly you like harvest and how careful you are with your combine. If you seeded poorly and didn't handle weed control, your harvest is going to be poor, right? This is just natural conditions. If you don't plant yourself well, you won't be able to handle the moment well. And yet we get sloppy. We live in the momentum of our life. We forget these things. I'm going to give you a little challenge later on about this, but the reality is we need to be very careful with how we're living the momentum of our lives because it begins to determine our next moments, which determines our next momentum, which determines our next moment, and this begins to spiral down on you very quickly. Okay, part two. Part two of each of these moments. Watch well and identify the moment. Try to identify the moment. If you recognize, if I told you, or an angel appeared suddenly to you over Sunday lunch and said, careful, the next sentence out of your life will determine the direction of your marriage for the next 10 years. You'd be careful, right? You wouldn't be careless with that sharp comment. You wouldn't pass on that word of gossip. You wouldn't, whatever that thing is, right? If somebody came up and told you the next moment of your life is the biggest moment of your next decade and you're going to live in the consequence. If my friend had been driving and an angel had appeared and said, how you handle the brakes on your truck is going to determine life or death for that lady crossing the crosswalk, you would have been careful. But we get lazy and we get slack and we get stuck in autopilot and we forget to make our choices. You have a handful of moments in a given day, at best. Sometimes only a dozen in a month that matter. Maybe you can identify 3 or 4 in a year that change the trajectory of your life. That's it. That's all you have. You have a little bit of time and a very big force, and it determines the momentum for the rest of your life. Watch your moments. They matter. There's people around you, and it matters. Last and not least, and this is huge, anybody who studies golf or hockey or baseball knows this, there is massive importance in your follow-through, right? If I hit this ball and I stop dead at the moment of impact, this ball will hardly move. Because that follow-through actually keeps a longer contact time between the blade and the ball. Now, it's all measured in milliseconds, but the difference between 1 millisecond and 2 milliseconds, according to that formula, is twice the speed or half the speed. It makes a huge difference. Milliseconds begin to matter. You've got to manage your time and increase the time you spend in these vital relationships, vital moments, and vital decisions. We can't be rash with this. I notice this especially with relationships. I'm just getting antsy, so I'll shoot that one off in the audience. I notice this with relationships. You can't budget quality time. You can only give quantity time, and quality time happens by accident. Ever notice that? You can try to budget quality time with your kid, and they're just not interested and they're off on other things or whatever. You can only give quantity time, and every now and then there's these moments, and these moments become memories, and these memories become a childhood, and the childhood determines the direction of the adult. Train your child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they will not depart from it. You don't know when you're training your child. You have to maximize your time if you want to maximize the momentum. All good? So here's what we got. Plant yourself well. Set yourself up for success. Watch carefully and identify your moments. And in order to do that, maximize your time. Careful with your time. Get involved. Now, I want to offer you a challenge. There's a lot of ways I can go, and you know what? I encourage you to think on this and just let the Holy Spirit through the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, he's been doing this for me for like 20 years. Filter what this can mean through your life, because I hope in 20 years I'm still pondering this concept. I'm learning to grow in it deeper. But I want to challenge you somewhere specifically. As you are building into momentum, here's what I can guarantee you. I know Thanksgiving and Christmas and hockey and school and everything's all firing up and everybody's getting all busy. Here's what I want you to know. No matter what you say, in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, you will be busy. Your schedule will be full. And that's okay. And then for the next few months, you're going to live that schedule. And that's okay. This isn't like some big lecture on busyness or something like that. That's for another day. I'll lecture you later on that. Right now, that's not what I'm talking about. It's okay to live in your momentum. But right now, today, you've got a moment. You've got a moment. And I want to encourage you in 3 things. Family, faith, freedom is what our church is about. It's what we talk about. That's what we do. It's what we say. It's what we believe. It's what we mean. Here's the deal. Family. You know, I actually really, 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 really deeply believe in the power of small groups. I know my mom was up here talking about, yes, Margaret's my mom, by the way, in case you were wondering. Every time I go like this, it's because I'm talking about my mom. She doesn't actually sound like that, but it's just a fun voice to do. Small groups are huge because you actually can't do family here. This is like a big, gigantic family gathering, multi-family family gathering. And you get to like laugh and argue and bump shoulders and elbows like at a big, giant family gathering, right? But you actually can't do family with this many people. Family, real family, happens in smaller groups, right? Microcosms. And so I really want to encourage you, you're going to get busy anyway, to be willing to sign up for a family small group. Consider this, because discipleship is about moments, and moments are about maximizing time, and you can't maximize time with people if you don't spend time with people. Small groups are actually huge, and maybe the first 2, 3, 4 times you meet, you're going, this is fine, I don't know. Build relationships, because when disaster strikes, big moments come, needs are needing to be met, or people are breaking apart in their lives. They want people around them, but if you haven't built people around you, they won't be around you. This is basic physics. Right? You invest time in others so that when you need time, they also can invest back in you. That's not the only reason you do it. You do it because you want to pour into and disciple other people and allow them to disciple you. My mom's leading a group, and yet she's growing and being pushed by leading a group. Others join the group and are grown and pushed by having to study and delve deep and talk and share within the group. It's amazing. Join a small group. Family. Faith. You know what? Actually, volunteering is such a huge part of faith. We talk about this all the time. And I sort of feel like, and I'd love to speak a message on this yet soon. Yet soon, not oba. A Low German's coming out. I'd love to preach a message on this sometime, but we actually don't push volunteering because we have teams that we need to fill. There are roles that we would like to fill. Yeah, Kids Church has some holes and stuff, and we'd love to, fill roles in Kids Church. Actually, volunteering is as much about you as it is about the team or the people you're volunteering for. It's good for you. It grows you and pushes you. It allows you to focus on others and not just yourself. And then church doesn't come across just as me being fed. I need to be fed. I need fed. Oh, God, I'm so tired. I need to be fed. I need to be fed. But to come to church and be able to say, I want to feed others. I want to invest in others. I'd like to invest in our kids or in our small groups or in our coffee or whatever, because I value those things, and I want to be a part of what God is doing in this church. If this is your church family, it needn't be, and if not, you're welcome, and I'm glad you're visiting, and I hope you feel at home. If this is your church family, you should be plugged in somewhere. It's good for you. It truly is. It's a good moment. And freedom. You know what? I want to encourage you to identify one relationship in your life that you think that God's telling you, that the Holy Spirit's guiding you, needs your time more. Each of us has a relationship in our life that we're allowing to atrophy. We're shrinking our time component. Time's getting smaller, and the momentum of that relationship's getting smaller. And these are vital relationships. Each of us has one. I want you to identify a relationship in your life that needs your time, that needs your focus. How you handle these questions actually can determine your next year. And your next year can determine the next year, because your moments determine your momentum. Understood? Is it all good? I would be remiss if I didn't end this message, though, by giving you the ultimate moment. You see, the reality is that Jesus Christ loves you so much. Whether you've made horrible decisions or not, you might be living in the grip and the gravity and the pull of a momentum of terrible decisions, bad decisions, decisions you feel guilty with, judged by, burdened by. Maybe you've hurt others, maybe others have hurt you, and you feel crushed and oppressed and lost in your own sin and in the sin of those around you. Those are real things. But Jesus Christ, right where you are this morning, loves you. He loves you so ridiculously much. He loves you so much that he died for you in your mess and in your sin, free of charge. He loves you so much. And what he asks in return is that you make a decision in a moment which determines your momentum, not just of your life, but of your soul for all eternity. That's some serious consequences, isn't that? The reality is, though, that Jesus, in light of the seriousness of this consequence, makes this a free choice that each of us gets to make in the moment. And the reality is, in this moment today, you have an opportunity to say, yes, Jesus, I will follow you. And to reap the benefits of that momentum for decades, centuries, and millennia to come. Is that not an amazing deal? Best deal I've ever received. But the reality is, right now today, there are people here whose hearts have never been this soft, who have never been this open, and who God has never spoken to this loudly, that he would love to walk in relationship with you, and that he cares about you as an individual, not about your past, and not about the supposed trajectory of your life. See, God has a better trajectory. He's got a different trajectory. And in this moment, he wants to meet you there. So in a moment, I'm going to get you to say a prayer. And you know what we're going to do is not to embarrass anybody who wants to make this decision. We're going to pray it all together. Does that sound good to you guys, church? And if this is going to be the first time you pray that prayer, all I ask of you is this. In this moment, you say it honestly in your heart. And then you come talk to myself or to Karen afterwards and let us know that this was the first time you prayed that prayer. And we'll help you up on some next steps and some next moments that are going to be able to grow you and develop you into the full-fledged discipleship. And if you are a believer, like I said, family, faith, freedom, get in a small group, get into one place of volunteering, and start nurturing that one relationship that's atrophying in your life. Amen, everybody? I'm going to get you all to bow your head right now. Eyes closed, head bowed. We're going to make this a safe place. Just like small groups are a safe place, we can kind of for a while make this a safe place where if you want to make a choice in this moment to follow Jesus, you can. So right now, I'm going to ask all of you to repeat after me. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you sent your son, Jesus, to die on the cross for my sins. And right now in this moment, I make a commitment to follow you. I make a commitment to serve you, Jesus. And I invite you, Jesus, into my heart. And I want to follow you for the rest of my days. Thank you for your free gift.
Thank you for your free gift.
I receive it today.
I receive it today.
In your name, Lord Jesus.
In your name, Lord Jesus.
Amen.